Good evening. A massive breakthrough today as far as the Oxford vaccine trial is concerned, and also the Wuhan trial. These are now peer-reviewed reports which have appeared in Lancet. We'll talk about the Oxford trial first and what the report on the Oxford trial says. This brings hope to billions around the world. Now, experts say that the Oxford trial is extremely encouraging. No serious adverse reactions take place at all. The majority of adverse events are mild or moderate in severity. A single dose elicits an increase in antibodies by day 28. Neutralizing antibodies in participants with a booster dose may be necessary. Further studies are needed for various population groups, but the vaccine candidate was safe, tolerated, and immunogenic. That means it is working out so far. The big question is, when will this actually come into the market? It will still be a few months from now. The Wuhan virus, the vaccine candidate, experts say that it induces humoral and cellular responses in 14 days. There are no serious adverse reactions here either. The trial was done on 602 people in Wuhan in one center. The Oxford trial significantly larger. A significant immune response in most people. The immune response was triggered after a single dose of immunization in the Wuhan case. So this is very, very welcome news as well. Joining us now to look at this, Professor Lawrence Gostin. Professor Gostin, thank you very much, sir, for being with us, and Dr. Rajveer Purohit, who is an associate professor of urology at the Mount Sinai Hospital. Professor Gostin, let me come to you first. Do you believe that finally we have that magic bullet that we are looking for, perhaps not in the final form that we seek, but that one of these two vaccines will bring hope to millions around the world?
Well, you know, it's very welcome news. There's no question about it. We now have two peer-reviewed vaccine trials that have shown two of the most promising candidates to be safe, and it provokes an immune response. That's a very early stage. I don't think we're ready to break out the champagne bottles yet. We still need to make sure that the neutralizing antibodies actually protect against Covid-19 and that they do so in a large population. The other thing we have to really be very careful about is that, you know, we have a global population in need of more than 6 billion people. That's going to be a lot of manufacturing capacity. And we have to be sure that it's equitably distributed to people from around the world. So this is very early. It's very encouraging. I don't want to diminish it at all. I'm highly appreciative of what has happened, but I do not believe that we're anywhere near close to getting a widely available, safe and effective vaccine. That's going to take a long time. Vaccines take time. Science takes time.
Dr. Purohit, you know what Professor Gostin says goes without saying. It's going to take some time. Perhaps not as much time as we would have perhaps thought a few months back, but it's still going to be a while away, several months at the very least. Dr. Purohit, just in terms of the science which has been proven in the case of the Oxford trial and the Wuhan trial, in simple terms, can you explain to our viewers what we now believe that these two vaccines can do?
Sure. Well, good evening to all your viewers, and thank you for having me on again. Just to sort of take a larger step back, one, it's incredible that we've already gotten to this phase of these trials so quickly since discovering this virus. It's only been about 6 months now since the world was confronted with the virus. And here we are already at phase 2 trials of the vaccine. You know, in the old days, it would take years and years to develop a vaccine to get where we're at. And again, just to take another larger step back, it's important to remember when we check for vaccines, there's different phases in that we have to go through to assure that it's a safe and effective vaccine, which I think the other professor was referring to. So phase 1 is usually in small numbers of patients, and they're just making sure that the vaccine is actually safe, and they're adjusting for dose. These trials, both of these trials that came out today were phase 2 trials where They look at larger numbers of patients, and usually in the numbering in the hundreds, to again assess for both efficacy as well as safety. And then the phase 3 trials will be next, which is when they look at thousands of patients to assess whether it actually prevents the infection from occurring. And in fact, for the Oxford vaccine, phase 3 trials, even though the data hasn't been published yet, are already underway in Brazil and in a few other countries. So what they did for both of these studies is they gave the vaccine to a control group of patients and gave the actual vaccine to another group of patients. And they assessed whether patients developed antibodies to these vaccines or not. So in the Oxford group, there was 1,077 patients who either received a control, fake vaccine, you might say, or the actual vaccine. And then they tested for antibodies, both at 14 days and at 28 days. And they found that anywhere between 91 to 100% of patients developed antibodies and develop the appropriate antibodies. Right. The question is, will these antibodies then protect patients from getting the actual coronavirus or not, or actually getting COVID or not?
Right.
And that's a question that phase 3 will be used to address. So we don't know that for sure, but I think the results are extremely promising. So patients clearly develop antibodies to one part of the virus.
Yep.
And it's, again, very optimistic, and can't lose sight of the fact that these are really speeded up trials. And then one final thing I might add is that the way these vaccines have been formulated, particularly the Oxford vaccine, it's easy to ramp up production. So the company suggests that they can ramp up to 2 billion vaccines fairly quickly if need be. So that's another promising
Sure, and in fact, I just wanted to go back to Professor Gostin about that. Professor, how many months away do you believe we are at this rate of peer review from saying that either the Wuhan vaccine or the Oxford vaccine is a done deal? I know it might still not ultimately work out. We tend to believe that perhaps it will work at this stage based on what we've seen so far, but in how many months at this rate of progress do you believe we will have a vaccine?
Well, I think it's, the Oxford trial is already going into phase 3 of the trials, where we are going at lightning speed. So I think it's, possible that we might be able to be getting out limited doses, particularly for front line, sometime in several months from now, and by the end of the year we may know more. These things are very, very hard to predict because the fact that we've got an immune response doesn't mean that it will protect us against COVID. So I don't think we should be in the realm of kind of forecasting, and I don't want to put pressure on the scientists. I mean, governments around the world, my own government, the United States, has something called Operation Warp Speed. I don't want to see us cut ethical corners. But yes, this is great news, but we need to be realistic. We need to make sure that we have the trials that actually prove that it's effective and continues to be safe. And then we're going to have to, I think, release it in phases. And we're going to have to prioritize those who need the vaccine first.
Essentially, healthcare workers and those with comorbidities and those who are elder. Absolutely. Point taken. Professor Lawrence Gostin and Dr. Rajveer Purohit, thank you both very much for joining us. Thank you very much indeed.